Morning. All right. It is Tuesday morning, and despite it being Taco Tuesday, I don't have any what do you say, border related news to share. It's just me today. No Mario, no Cameron, no surprise walk on guests. I don't think. Nope. I don't see anybody else pulling in the driveway. So I think we're good. Um, so this morning, nice, easy show. Good to see everybody. Everybody hitting the chat already. Uncle Steve, good morning. I see Patrick there. Good morning. Good morning. Patrick says howdy, Jim, but I don't see any comments from His Majesty just yet. But I do see Pit Danny there, and the viewership numbers do. Those of you already chatting do not reflect the viewership numbers just yet. Fish and Golf's with us this morning too. Good morning. Good morning, and. Yeah, so let's see. This morning, I'm gonna throw the banner up for a minute. Y'all check that out and you support the show. Go to buymeacoffee.com/brushfiremind. If I can get everybody that is subscribed to the channel right now to go to Brushfiremind on buymeacoffee.com and subscribe for $5 a month, I will make Mario and Cameron both quit their jobs and go full time. Sergeant Major says the money taken from soldiers' pay is partly food money, which is reasonably reallocated. Well, we've got an article this morning, Sergeant Major, that we're going to take a look at related to that topic. I mean, obviously, that was that's what the thumbnail suggested. So we're gonna take a look at this article from military.com and see what they have to say and opine on it somewhat. So according to military.com, article over the weekend says over $151 million taken from soldiers' paychecks for food costs were spent elsewhere by the Army. So so what you say, the money taken from soldiers is partly food money, which is reasonably allocated. I have no doubt that that's true, that it is partly reasonably allocated. But let me, I've got an anecdote for that. I mentioned this briefly the other day while Mario was on air with us. He and I were both stationed at Schofield Barracks on Oahu in Hawaii for a while. And this is one that just, it always just pissed me off. So right by the front gate on Schofield Barracks was what used to be the chow hall. And there was a fire in the chow hall and it burned down about a year or two before I actually arrived at that base. I was at that base for 4 years. And in that 4 years, they never rebuilt the chow hall. Now, there was another chow hall on the other side of base if I'm being honest, most of our lower enlisted guys didn't even know where it was. So it's important to understand that the chow hall that burned down was right inside the main gate. Now, I haven't been there in, 10 years, 13 years. I've been back there in 13 years. So hopefully, good God, hopefully it's been fixed since then. But the entire time I was there, that building had been cleaned up and was used as basically a vacant ballroom that we'd use for meeting spaces for large group parties, for seminars, for professional development meetings, stuff like that. Directly across the street from that chow hall was the Shopette, the Burger King, and the Popeyes chicken. Right there. Now, there wasn't, like I said before, there was another chow hall on base. But importantly, this one right inside the main gate was the chow hall that was attached to the quad with all the barracks on it, right? So that's where the soldiers live. That's where a lot of our lower enlisted actually live full time. The barracks, it's an apartment building for the soldiers, right? In fact, I hope Be Controversial is watching this morning. The Air Force refers to them as dorms. It's a barracks. It is not the same as a dorm. What the Air Force has is not a barracks. It is in fact a college dorm. Oh, that's a whole other topic. But they, the idea that you would have your soldiers living in the barracks, let the chow hall burn down, and then just leave it. Just say, "Oh, sorry guys, tough." Traditionally, when you're on base, living in, and I've been there. At DLI, I lived on base. I lived in the barracks, and I walked to the chow hall for meals. In fact, at the chow hall at DLI, that's the Presidio in Monterey, California, the language college, the chow hall there was nowhere to park at the chow hall. Right, it was set right off the road, right off the walking path, and the closest parking lot to that chow hall was the parking lots for the various barracks for the most part. So, and in fact, there were two chow halls, and that was the case for both of them. There was nowhere to park at the chow hall. You had to park somewhere else and walk over. So that's something that aggravated the absolute shit out of me. And when I was stationed at Schofield, I was already, I was a non-commissioned officer. I was married, lived off base. And even my offices were on the opposite side of the base from where that chow hall was. This wasn't something that affected me personally and directly as an individual. This was something that affected my soldiers, my privates and specialists, my E4s, E3s, E2s, E1s. And it, believe it or not, okay, we're an MI unit. Fair enough. We had a lot of soldiers that struggled with their weight, and a big chunk of that is basically the immediate available food option for them was Burger King and Popeye's chicken. And don't get it twisted, right? RFK just got nominated, and confirmed. And there's talk about, oh, well, we should ban all this, we should ban all that. And, clearly that's not what RFK is saying. We've seen the man eat a McDonald's cheeseburger and drink a Diet Coke with Donald Trump. But there's a vast gulf between you shouldn't ban bad food and you should eat it every meal. There is a wide gulf between those two positions, right? I'll eat a Mickey D's cheeseburger on occasion. Well, I used to say that. I did a whole show on this topic, probably over a year ago. You can go to Golden Corral and have vegetables. You can have like grilled squash with a fried pork chop for basically what it costs to get a value meal at McDonald's. So that's always my choice. Sergeant Major says, if I had been the post CSM, there would have been a field kitchen deployed as soon as the fire was out. Leadership in the military is out of touch. 100%. I 100% agree with that. And y'all, we talk, I mentioned occasionally that my, we call Dad His Majesty. My buddies call my dad Sergeant Major, and it's one thing to say that somebody was a Sergeant Major. The old man was in an active military role in the U.S. Army and various components, active guard reserve, etc., for 36 years. Y'all, I'm barely that fucking old. So when the old man talks about what he would have done as a CSM, he spent longer as a CSM than most soldiers spend as soldiers. So we tend to take his wisdom to heart on topics of this sort. But this is definitely somewhere that I would love to see DOGE take an interest. Hey, good morning, Lincoln. Good morning, little buddy. Megan says, Lincoln says, good morning, Mr. Chris. Good morning, little buddy. Okay, so it says over 151 million taken from soldiers' paychecks for food costs spent elsewhere by the Army. The Army is repurposing more than half of the money it collects from junior enlisted soldiers for food, according to data reviewed by military.com. Now, I know military.com is a newspaper, right? Now, I can promise you that this show doesn't get any USAID money. I can also promise you I would absolutely cash that check because I have scruples, but I also have 4 kids and they want to eat every damn day. So according to the data reviewed by military.com, the numbers suggest that a large portion of those funds are not going toward feeding soldiers, a diversion of resources coming at a time when troops increasingly struggle to find nutritious food on base. Excuse me. The money is collected in what amounts to a tax on troops taken from their basic allowance for subsistence payments, roughly $460 per month, that is automatically deducted from the paychecks of service members who live in barracks and is intended to help cover food costs. For junior enlisted troops who earn about $30,000 annually, the cost can be consequential. So, when you're a soldier, you get paid, you get a base salary, and then you talk about having a job with benefits. As civilians, your paychecks as jobs with benefits look a little different what a soldier's paycheck looks like, because we get paid certain other things, and this is a complicated. There is a complicated amount of additional math that happens in the Army because Democrats are evil. And I mean that absolutely. So some 75, 80 years ago, there were actually protests, right? A long time ago, it was the case that government employees didn't pay taxes, right? So we're talking, 1913, the IRS comes into existence. We're told that it's never going to charge taxes of anything more than 2% in income tax. And it's only ever going to be those evil rich people, right? Fast forward 10 years later, the top marginal tax rate is over 90%, and people are refusing to pay it. In fact, you had protests, and I promise this all relates directly back to this. You're just stick with me. So there are protests that happen around the country where companies who oppose, businesses that are owned by good thinking Americans who oppose the idea of an income tax, they start running this game where, they've been, you get paid and then you'd have to go pay the tax man. So these companies build it like, okay, we're doing this for our people to make it easy for them. And they set up little booths. So you go to the first booth and you get your paycheck, and then you go to the next booth and there's somebody there who calculates what you owe in income tax and you pay them, right? And we're talking physical cash. There were several businesses that did it. And that got the American citizen, the American taxpayer, absolutely incensed about the idea of paying taxes, because it wasn't getting a paycheck and looking at it and say, oh, I made $1,000 this week and the government took $300 out. It was, oh, hey, I made $1,000 this week. What do you mean I have to give you $300? I just got this. I got bills. You have to give me $300. People got mad. And when people got mad and started protesting, they created the withholding tax. At that time, government employees did not pay income tax. And this was a reasonable, rational argument that, well, you're being paid tax money. You're being paid with tax money. Now remember, we're talking about a time when the government was much smaller. It was still too big, but it was much smaller than it is now. But there was a time when U.S. soldiers especially didn't pay income tax because they were being paid with tax money. So you got Joe Schmucky earns $1,000, right? Pays us $300, right? Times 1,000, and then the soldier gets paid his little, his couple of bucks. And I know I'm I'm being disingenuous with the numbers because no working man was making $1,000 a week in 1934. But at the time, government employees, soldiers, people who were paid directly from the government from taxpayer rolls didn't pay taxes. So it turned out, no, Uncle Steve, they did vote. They did vote, and that's where the problem rose. Soldiers have always tended to be conservative, have always tended toward the Republican Party and a dedication to the Constitution. When Democrats figured that shit out, they initiated a movement to argue that if you don't pay taxes, you shouldn't be allowed to vote. Right? It was kind of the reverse of what they're doing with the illegal aliens now. What they're doing now is they're trying to add more voters to their team. Back then, they were trying to delete voters from our team. And so the compromise was, okay, fine. Soldiers are just going to pay taxes now, so they get to keep voting, right? And Uncle Steve, I know you're a veteran and you're old as shit, but this is even just a little bit before your time. Not a lot, but just a little bit before your time. Pop may have gotten an untaxed Coast Guard paycheck, maybe. But it was a hot minute ago. Yeah, Pop probably got a paycheck from the Coast Guard that didn't have taxes on it. That would have been right around the time he was in his late teens and early 20s. But anyway, so the military and government employees pay income tax now literally because Democrats tried to use that as a lever to delete voters from the voter rolls. And the I also read his story. So when it says it here, what is, and I say all that to get back to this paragraph here. What it says here, the money is collected in what amounts to a tax on troops. So that's a little disingenuous. Dad says it was World War II, so okay. That's yes. Anyway. All right. Pipe down, veterans. Pipe down. So where it refers to the money being taken from their BAS in what they say is in what amounts to a tax on troops, kind of what I was getting at there, because of that political maneuvering to create income tax requirements of troops to begin with. One way that we've tried to deal with that and mitigate the damage done to our servicemen and women, instead of giving them raises to bring the salaries they're paid in line with actual average earnings in modernity, is we pay them a base salary which is taxed, but then they have their untaxed benefits. Basic allowance for housing, basic allowance for subsistence. If I remember correctly, I think my foreign language proficiency bonuses were untaxed. Your combat pay, your hazardous duty pay, things like that are outside of the taxable category. So you have your base pay, and then you have a bunch of benefits that are not taxed. Well, the BAS, the basic allowance for subsistence, is paid to you assuming you are also collecting BAH because you live off post. You're paying rent out of your BAH, and then you're buying groceries with your BAS. So if you're living on post, you don't get BAH because you're being provided housing, right? And if you are living in the BAH, it's assumed that you're going to be eating in the DFAC, the dining facility, right? It's capital DFAC. The dining facility. or the the chow hall, as it were. And little aside, y'all, if you've never eaten in an Army chow hall, you're missing out. And if you've never eaten in an Air Force chow hall, I hate to badmouth my brothers in green, but Be Controversial can attest to this as well. An Air Force chow hall, especially the one in Kyrgyzstan, is just another level. It's Golden Corral plus a free convenience store selling the highest end energy drinks and protein shakes and energy bars and the Cliff bars and all that stuff, as produced by Gordon Ramsay. That's Manning Airfield in Kyrgyzstan. Whew. I still have good dreams about that place. But so to say that it amounts to a tax, that's disingenuous in the article. But let's go on. So the money is collected what amounts to a tax on troops taken for their basic allowance subsistence payments, roughly $460 per month, that is automatically deducted from the paychecks of service members who live in barracks and is intended to help cover food costs. For junior enlisted troops who earn about $30,000 annually, the cost can be consequential. 2024 financial records provided by the service from 11 of the Army's largest bases show that more than 151 million of, 225 million collected. Excuse me. Hey, Pitt Danny says Marines had excellent surf and turf on Fridays. We got surf and turf in Afghanistan, but we only had non-alcoholic beer to drink with it. And buddy, I tell you what, when you're living in the desert full time, that dry ass thin little piece of shoe leather steak and that poor, it's the raisin of lobster tails. It's fucking delicious. So given that the Army operates 104 garrisons, the true amount of unspent funds is likely far higher. It's just returned to the big pool of Army funds, and it's used someplace else. One service official with direct knowledge of the situation said during an interview that was arranged by the Army Public Affairs Office, referring to redirected BAS money collected from soldiers. I really, really do not like when I'm hit with these anonymous sources. One service official with direct knowledge. This seems like one where you need to name names. But here it goes on. At Fort Stewart, Georgia, for example, soldiers contributed $17 million, but the base spent just $2.1 million, redirecting 87% of the funds. Schofield Barracks in Hawaii collects $14.5 million, but used only $5.3 million, meaning 63% of the money was used elsewhere. And it was not used, at least when I was there, to rebuild the burned down chow hall. All but two bases left more than half of the money for food unspent. Joint Base Elmdorf, Richardson, Alaska, and Fort Bliss, Texas, left 51 and 49% of funds on the table, respectively. Now, that it says it's unclear what specifically the additional funds taken from soldiers being spent on, but they do not appear to be going toward feeding the soldiers. Now, it may be that money's redirected, and instead of being spent on food in the actual chow hall in the DFAC, that they're spending that money on MREs and the like. But that's me reaching to find a reasonable excuse for money to be disappearing in that way. I would, and the article doesn't actually come to any conclusions as far as what's happening with that money. They don't know. Danny asks, did that money go to USAID? It wouldn't surprise me. But to see that, as much as I loved my time in the Army, over the last several years, we've seen the Army and the military generally be infected with woke trash and basically become a captured agency of the Democrat Party. We've seen it so publicly that for the last 4 years, the Army has been failing, the entire military has been failing year over year to meet its recruitment goals, right? Young, strong American men do not want to go and fight a rich man's war in an army that has become increasingly lame and gay, right? We've talked on the show about what it was like when they repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell, right? And when that happened, nobody gave a shit. Nobody cared. Nobody in uniform gave a second thought to whether or not your battle buddy was a homosexual. Nobody cared. But it was an important political issue for the Obama administration, who was running like the devil from the fact that he ran his first term on traditional marriage, right? Never forget, Donald Trump is the only president, the only one ever to have been elected without ever having run on traditional marriage. Even Biden, who won his one and only term after Trump ran the first presidential campaign that never ran on traditional marriage and restricting, the rights of gays to get married. And I'm not saying whether I agree with gay marriage or not. That's irrelevant to the point. Even Biden, who was, ostensibly a Democrat ally character in his one and only term, y'all, he absolutely ran against gay marriage the first 2 times he ran for president. Let's not forget, Joe Biden has been failing to get elected for 40 years. He first ran back in the early 80s. That was the one where he had to drop out because he got caught in a nasty plagiarism scandal. But when they repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell, I was downrange. I was out in sector, hunting terrorists, killing bad guys. And they made us close up operations and come back to base, which meant shutting down, loading up a convoy, going back to a bigger outpost, and sitting in a room all day to get a briefing on how we were supposed to treat the gay soldiers that were about to be coming out and announcing themselves, and all this because of the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And we're all sitting there like, this is the least important thing you could possibly have made me stop killing terrorists for. Well, Donald Trump got elected in November, and since then, things are turning around. Now, I hope to see DOGE go take a look at this money being wasted, but I want to end the show this morning on some good news. And I do say end the show. I'm gonna have to cap it early because all my kids had a dental appointment this morning, which means that when I went in to get my coffee, the pot was almost empty. So I don't have a backup. The wife and the kids took all my damn coffee with them. So, but I want to wrap this one up this morning on good news. Early momentum. Like I said, for the last 4 years, year over year, while Biden was in office, the entire military failed repeatedly to meet its recruiting objectives. And they were just getting their asses kicked by young American men not wanting to go and serve in the trans man's army. Well, early momentum. Army hits 30,000 recruits, half its goal for the year. Y'all, it's barely a week after Valentine's Day. It's not even a week after Valentine's Day, right? We are in the Ides of February. Donald Trump will have been the president for 1 month on Toter Win Thursday this week. And the Army has just hit 50% of its recruitment goal for the fiscal year. That is outstanding. The Army is already nearly halfway to meeting its ambitious goal of recruiting 61,000 active duty soldiers during this fiscal year, according to internal data reviewed by military.com. Now, since I know you're watching, Dad, I would love to get you to comment on just leave us a quick comment in the chat on this. They refer to this as the ambitious goal of recruiting 61,000 active duty soldiers during this fiscal year. I don't know if 61,000. I don't know if that should be categorized as an ambitious goal, but if they're reporting that is the goal, okay, that's the goal, and they've met half of it. That's a good thing. I don't know if I'd call 60,000 an ambitious goal for 1 year of recruiting. Yeah, Be Controversial says it right. Trump's first month has been a great year. Dad points out recruiting year is October to October. I did say for the fiscal year. And in fairness, you're correct. That's well. Okay, it's a little confusing on the language. Perhaps they do mean $30,000 for the fiscal year, or $30,000 new enlistments for this fiscal year. But even that, what that tells you, I bet if you go back and look, October of last year was probably not a great month for recruitment, for so many reasons. But I bet you November, in fact, I happen to know November and December were record-setting months for recruitment. The milestone comes as the service continues to grapple with historic recruitment crisis, the worst since the Vietnam War, underscoring the uphill battle to convince young Americans to don the uniform. And guys, I just mentioned all the stuff about woke and gay stuff in the Army, which was a problem, and that did scare some people off for sure. But the Army's had some other. That's what I thought. Sergeant Major says, actually, thank you, Dad. That's what I thought. He says, actually, 61,000 is a low goal. The Army needs 100,000. We have a great shortage of soldiers in combat brigades. That's what I thought. 100,000 sounded more like the kind of numbers that you and I have talked about in the past when we've had conversations about the recruiting mission. I was never a recruiter. That was never my job. But Dad was one of the all-time all-stars in the recruiting world. And we've talked about the business of recruiting on many occasions because it's a sales job, right? Obviously it's a little different, but it is a sales job. Army recruiters listen to lectures by Zig Ziglar, right? They read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, right? Just like any self-respecting salesman who wants to actually meet his sales goals, you study the business, and that's part of that. So we've had conversations about that. I thought that was the case, 61,000. So to call that ambitious is a little generous, right? Maybe a little generous with the language. But back to what I was saying before that, all the woke stuff, all the lefty capture stuff has absolutely been a contributing factor to disinterest in joining the military. But Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, the Middle East, Biden's absolute betrayal in Afghanistan. I bet you there are a lot of high school seniors that were ready to go enlist despite all the woke garbage and the drag admirals and all that nonsense. I bet you there were still a lot of young men graduating high school, getting ready to go and get into an ROTC program through a college, start in the reserve, work their way through 4 years, come straight into uniform, go full on active duty and balls to the wall. And then they said, wait a minute. Joe just left us there? Joe just packed up our shit and left our guys in Afghanistan and left? Like, and then some reasonable, level-headed adult said, no, young man, you don't understand. That's not what he did. He didn't just pack up all our shit and leave troops on the ground. No, he just left. He didn't bother to pack up our shit. He just left all our shit. He left the guns and the bombs and the tanks and the trucks. He just left everything there, and now it's the Taliban's equipment. What he did was he armed the Taliban and reinstalled them in Afghanistan as the national federal authority. So no, he didn't just pack up his toys and leave. He left without his toys. Your toys that you paid to. That you paid for. So this, absolutely goes in the win column for the Donald, that Army recruiting numbers are getting back up. I love to see that. And here we go. We've even seen it in the commercials lately. No more Disney princess with two mommies marching at pride rallies. This is what the Army is now. Cartoon commercials. No. We're seeing recruiting video. Here, I'll tell you what, before we wrap it up this morning, I'll pop on X and see if I can find the new Army recruiting ad. There we go. Pop up pretty quick. So this is what it looks like now. Oh. Wait a minute. Okay, hold up. Wait a minute. Did that look to anybody else like soldiers doing a PT test on a rowing machine? What? Sure enough, that looks like the APFT being done on a rowing machine. Damn. Whew. I didn't know the Army got that easy. Damn. Well, yeah, you got okay. And then there's another one. They're doing the litter carrier relay. I told you the story about getting kicked off the PT competition team for the litter carrier relay the other day. Yeah, buddy. I ain't gonna lie. That. Damn. I mean, what do you think, Sergeant Major? What do you think, Uncle Steve? What do you think, guys? That almost makes me want to enlist all over again. I mean, damn. We went to that. We went to that from the Disney princess, My Two Mommies commercial. Oh yeah, here you go. Somebody posted it like this. Perfect.
I also marched for equality.
This is what we were subjected
Although I
to.
had a fairly typical childhood, took ballet, played violin, I also marched for equality. I like to think I've been defending freedom from an early age. When I was 6 years old, one of my moms had an accident that left her paralyzed. Doctors said she might never walk again. But she tapped into my family's pride to get back on her feet, eventually standing at the altar to marry my other mom. With such powerful role models, I finished high school at the top of my class, and then attended UC Davis, where I joined a sorority full of other strong women. But as graduation approached, life around inspiring women,
we went from that.
My own challenge, and maybe shatter some stereotypes.
My God, it's a minute and a half long. My God. So we went from that to the other one that I just showed you a minute ago. Hell yeah, we're seeing recruiting numbers go up. Hell yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there, guys. Thanks for watching this morning. Y'all be safe out there. Go click the link, buymeacoffee.com/brushfiremind. We appreciate your support. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.